By the time I reached the front door, the windows were glowing faintly, but the power had been out here for years. I told myself it was just a trick of the shadows. I told myself a lot of things that night. Most of them were lies. The air was thick with silence, but it felt heavy, like the house was waiting. The locals had warned me. Monte Cristo homestead was the most haunted house in Australia, they said. A place soaked in death, tragedy, and something darker night. Built in 1885 by Christopher Crawley, it was meant to be a dream home. But over the years, every corner of that house witnessed horror, murders, suicides, and unexplained deaths left a stain on the walls. Some say it's still there. I was a paranormal investigator, or at least I wanted to be. So when the challenge came to spend one night alone inside the homestead, I couldn't say no. I stepped inside. Just as the sun disappeared, the door creaked shut behind me, sealing me in. That's when I noticed the temperature drop. My breath started to fog, even though it was summer. The smell hit next iron like blood, faint but unmistakable. I set up my camera gear, trying to ignore the way the house seemed to watch me. Then, at exactly 8:12 p.m., I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, upstairs. The problem? Every single door leading upstairs was padlocked. No way anyone could be up there. I told myself it was just the house settling, but my heart wouldn't listen. With shaking hands, I found a key hidden under a loose floorboard. The lock clicked open. The stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed. The air grew colder with every step. At the top, the hallway stretched endlessly, walls peeling, paint cracked, shadows pooling in every corner. That's when I saw it. A small silhouette framed in the nursery window, motionless, watching. I called out, but silence was my only answer. I turned to the room. The nursery was frozen in time, dusty toys scattered, a rocking horse moving gently by itself. Key pulled out my EVP recorder, hoping for a response. Almost immediately, a faint whisper came through. Stay forever. My skin crawled. Suddenly, a burst of childlike laughter echoed behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. My camera battery drained rapidly, dropping from 80% to 2 in seconds. Then, I heard my own voice calling from the hallway. I followed it, every nerve on fire. The hallway lights flickered, shadows twisting into shapes I couldn't name. Footsteps matched mine too close, too heavy. The door at the end slammed shut, just as I reached for the handle. Inside was a guest room, untouched, pristine. A figure stood in a corner, head bowed. When the light flickered, it vanished. I was no longer alone. I hadn't been since the first step inside. My heart pounded as I retreated to the servants' quarters. Broken beds, shattered mirrors, the air thick with rot. I found diary pages detailing cruel treatment servants kept in darkness, forgotten. From inside the walls came scratching, slow and deliberate. Then a pale hand burst through a hole, gripping my shirt. I tore free, my breath ragged. Rushing toward the main staircase, I found it warped steps, twisted handrails missing. A black figure stood at the bottom, head tilted. Every blink brought it closer. I ran upstairs instead, desperate to escape through the balcony. When I opened the balcony door, the outside wasn't there. Instead, endless rooms stretched out before me, impossible in their architecture. Voices overlapped, men, women, children, all chanting one word, stay. Walls seemed to breathe. Floors pulsed beneath my feet. Then the house spoke. A deep, cold voice echoed, one more for the collection. Pressure crushed my chest. Visions flashed past, deaths replaying in horrifying detail. The mimic voice changed. Now it was my mother's, calling for help. I ran toward it, knowing it was a trap. At the last door, I stopped. Inside was me, watching. The doppelganger smiled, whispering, "You can leave if you give me your name." I refused. The figure screamed. Walls cracked. Lights exploded. Wind howled. I bolted for the front door. It was there again, the threshold to freedom. But as I stepped outside, something whispered my full name into my ear. I left Monte Cristo homestead that morning. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear footsteps upstairs, and they're getting closer. I still remember the exact moment I first laid eyes on the Myrtles plantation. It was late afternoon, deep in the Louisiana bayou. Sun was sinking low behind towering cypress trees, casting long, eerie shadows over the cracked driveway. The air was thick, humid, heavy, almost suffocating, and not just from the weather. There was this strange weight in the atmosphere, like the entire place was holding its breath, watching me approach. The plantation itself looked like something out of a forgotten era. Built in 1796, its stately columns and grand facade had seen centuries of history, laughter, love, sorrow, and tragedy all folded into the very wood and stone. Yet, despite the beauty, there was an undeniable darkness clinging to the place, as if the past tragedies had seeped into the walls and refused to leave. Before I got out of my car, I was warned by a caretaker, a man whose eyes seemed haunted, even during the bright day. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not alone here. You won't be." His words settled deep in my mind, and I felt a chill despite the sweltering heat. Crossing the porch, the boards groaned beneath my feet. The peeling paint and warped wood seemed to whisper secrets I couldn't yet hear. When I pushed open the heavy front door, the air inside was thick with the scent of age and decay. Dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of dying sunlight. Every creak and groan echoed loudly in the stillness. The plantation had been the site of many dark events: murders, mysterious deaths, disappearances, Kia. But the legend that gripped me most was about Chloe. Kia, the slave girl whose story haunted the plantation even more than the house itself. Chloe's tale was tragic. Some say she was a loyal servant, others that she was a spy who poisoned the family to win her freedom. What everyone agreed on was that her death was violent and unjust, and that her spirit remained trapped, restless, angry. I set up my camera gear in the children's bedroom, a small space cluttered with antique toys, faded wallpaper, and a cracked rocking horse. I wanted to capture anything that would hint the stories were true. For hours, there was nothing but silence and the occasional creak of the old house settling. But later, when I reviewed the footage, my heart stopped. There, in the corner of the frame, was a faint, translucent image of a young girl. Her face was pale, her eyes deep pools of sorrow. She wasn't there when I filmed, no one was. I played the clip again and again, a cold shiver running down my spine. That night, I stayed in one of the upstairs rooms. The bed creaked beneath me as I lay awake, the darkness pressing close. Then, I felt a sudden cold breeze brushing my arm like icy fingers. My heart hammered as footsteps echoed down the hallway. Slow, deliberate. I called out, but the house swallowed my words. The footsteps stopped outside my door, and the silence returned thick and heavy. Shadows flickered across the walls, shifting and writhing as if alive. I pulled the covers tighter, praying for dawn. The next morning, I spoke again with the caretaker, who shared more about Chloe. They say she cursed the plantation with her dying breath, that no one who wronged her could leave unscathed. Over the years, many visitors have reported strange noises, objects moving on their own, and that ever-present feeling of being watched. So I packed to leave. I couldn't shake the feeling that Chloe's eyes were on me, that her story wasn't finished. And as I drove away, the house seemed to watch me retreat into the distance, waiting for its next visitor. There's a small island in the Venetian lagoon called Poveglia. At first glance, it looks like any other forgotten patch of land, overgrown with thorny weeds, broken down buildings swallowed by vines, and docks cracked and rotting into the dark water. But those who know its history speak of it in hushed, fearful tones, warning that the island is cursed. They say it's one of the most haunted places in the world. A place where death lingers, where the veil between this life and the next is dangerously thin. I first heard about Poveglia from an old fisherman in Venice. His face was weathered and pale, his eyes clouded with memories better left buried. He leaned close and whispered, "Poveglia is not a place for the living. You go there, you don't come back the same." I laughed it off at the time, but that warning stayed with me, a quiet echo in the back of my mind. Months later, fueled by curiosity and a need to confront those stories, I booked a small boat to Poveglia. The journey itself was unnerving. As the boat cut through the glassy lagoon waters, a thick fog rolled in, swallowing the island until it was just a shadow on the horizon. When I finally stepped onto the cracked, weathered dock, an unnatural silence welcomed me. No birds sang, no insects chirped. The usual sounds of life were absent, replaced by an oppressive stillness that seemed to press down on my very soul. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of rot and decay, like a grave freshly dug and left uncovered. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud against the stone, and every instinct screamed for me to turn back. But some dark force, drew me deeper into the island. Poveglia's story is soaked in blood and misery. In the 14th century, when the bubonic plague ravaged Europe, the island became a quarantine station, a dumping ground for the sick and dying. Thousands were brought here, chained and abandoned, left to suffer and die alone. Mass graves were dug hastily, often filled with dozens at once. Some say the island holds the bones of over 160,000 souls. Centuries later, in the early 1900s, Poveglia was turned into a mental asylum. But rather than healing, it became a place of torment and madness. Patients were locked away in small, dark cells. Torture and neglect were routine. Some doctors experimented on patients, pushing them to the edge of sanity and beyond. Many died there, forgotten and alone. Rumors say some doctors themselves lost their minds, ending their lives by leaping from the island's highest tower. I made my way through the decaying asylum buildings. The walls were cracked and stained, peeling layers of faded paint like rotten skin. My flashlight flickered as shadows danced across the walls, forming shapes that disappeared when I blinked. The floor was littered with broken glass, rusted metal beds, and forgotten medical tools stained with time and silence. The silence was deafening, but not empty. Whispered voices seemed to drift on the stale air. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks. Then I heard it, soft, desperate whispers, like a million broken prayers rising from the depths of the earth. I felt a sudden, cold breath on the back of my neck, a chill so sharp it burned. I spun around, heart pounding, but the hallway was empty. The shadows seemed to pulse, alive with unseen presence. Footsteps echoed behind me, slow, heavy, dragging, as if someone or something was limping after me. I dared not look back. I forced myself onward, deeper into the asylum's heart. I passed through padded cells with walls stained a deep crimson, rooms where patients screamed silently in madness, and corridors that twisted and turned like a maze designed to trap both body and mind. At one point, I found a room filled with dusty journals and photographs. The faded pages told stories of suffering, patients begging for release, doctors' cold reports of cruel treatments. A sudden breeze flipped a page as if guided by invisible fingers. I stumbled upon a narrow, winding staircase leading to the bell tower. The stairs groaned beneath my feet, each step a sinister warning. The air grew colder, heavier, almost suffocating. At the top, the bell hung silent, shrouded in thick cobwebs. The windows looked out over the island, twisted trees, broken buildings, and dark water stretching into the horizon. The light was fading fast. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening crash. The temperature plunged. Darkness thickened like a living thing, wrapping around me like chains. I felt cold hands grip my arms, icy fingers digging into my skin. My breath came in ragged gasps. Panic threatened to consume me, but I forced myself to remain still. Then, a voice whispered, urgent and filled with ancient rage, spoke directly into my ear. Leave before it's too late. I bolted down the stairs, heart hammering wildly, shadows clawing at my heels. The walls seemed to close in, groaning with the weight of centuries of sorrow. Outside, the island's silhouette was a dark wound against the night sky. I didn't stop running, until the boat rocked beneath me, the dark water swallowing Poveglia from sight. Okay, but the island's curse didn't end with my escape. Okay, in the days and weeks that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. At night, faint whispers seeped through the silence. Shadows flickered just beyond my sight. I felt cold fingers brush my skin, and sometimes a weight would settle on my chest, as if the island as restless souls were reaching out, reminding me that some places never truly let go. Poveglia still calls to those who dare listen. It waits, patient and hungry. And for those who ignore its warning, it claims them. Beneath the bustling streets of Paris lies a hidden world, a labyrinth of tunnels called the Catacombs. I had heard the rumors, the warnings whispered by those who dared venture too deep, but nothing prepared me for the chilling reality. The entrance was small and unassuming, a narrow stairway descending into darkness. I switched on my flashlight and began the descent, each step echoing into the silence. The air grew colder, damper, thicker, with a scent of earth and decay. As I reached the bottom, I was surrounded by walls lined with the bones of millions, skulls and femurs arranged in eerie patterns that stretched endlessly into the shadows. The weight of history pressed down on me, a reminder of lives long gone but never forgotten. I moved cautiously, every sound amplified in the silence: dripping water, the shuffle of my footsteps, the faint hum of distant voices. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I felt it, a sudden chill, a presence brushing against my shoulder. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing. Only swirling shadows, shifting just beyond my vision. Whispers began to fill the tunnels, soft and unintelligible. They seemed to speak in a language I couldn't understand, yet filled with sorrow and warning. I tried to steady my breathing, but my heart was racing. The catacombs aren't just a resting place for the dead. They hold memories, emotions, and some say, spirits who refuse to leave. Stories tell of explorers who became lost forever, their screams swallowed by the darkness. As I pressed deeper, the maze seemed to close in, passages twisting and turning like the labyrinth of my own fear. I could feel unseen eyes watching me, following my every step. At one point, I stumbled upon a small alcove, bones stacked high. A sudden movement caught my eye, a shadow darting behind the stacks. I froze, flashlight trembling in my hand. My mind screamed to turn back, but the exit felt miles away, swallowed by the endless tunnels. Panic set in as I realized I was no longer sure which way led out. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw the faint glow of daylight filtering through the stairwell. Leaf washed over me like a wave, but the catacombs had left their mark. Even now, in quiet moments, I hear faint whispers and footsteps, as if the shadows follow me still, reminding me that some places never truly release their dead.